I was going after the real election fraud, which is computer algorithms, which flip votes. It's embedded into the software. It's been going on at least for 20 years. We don't have elections in America, we have selections. I'll repeat that. We don't have elections, we have selections. We live in a third world state, and my parents thought we left a third world country. But this is a third world state. And we should get over all of our illusions. Someone's got something going off there. So, the fortunate thing that you have with someone like me is I've been doing math since I was around 10 years old. I built the first email system when I was 14. And so when this problem came to me, the problem was they try to screw someone who actually knows math. And so what I'm going to share with you is unequivocal mathematics that shows elections in this country are being flipped. And anyone you see in office, it's because someone wanted them to be there. It's not you voted for them. So we had 3,000 volunteers, as Michelle said, on the ground. We raised $1.6 million. If you came to my house, 5,000 letters, 10,000 letters from people all over this country. 10,000 lawn signs, 20,000 bumper stickers. We did 500 to 600 standouts. We had a real campaign.
1.5 million cards distributed.
We distributed those cards which said stop election fraud long before it became fashionable to do that. And so they worked with Galvin and they flipped the election. Because we were headed for a freaking landslide. If you talk to everyone on the ground, it was landslide, landslide, landslide. There's no way a guy who has no lawn signs, no bumper stickers, no campaign can ever win. You know, I had 50 years experience in a field called pattern recognition. Can everyone see this? And the reason this is interesting, pattern recognition, what this is about. And my whole life has been spent into that. Bunch of degrees at MIT. You know, I was nominated for the U.S. National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Won every award you could win at MIT, okay? Worked my butt off, not like Elizabeth Warren, okay? Next. So it'll come into, so what you're going to learn today is pattern recognition you're going to learn, and you're going to learn about our electronic voting systems. I had to learn this very quickly. So what you see here is, this is an electronic voting system. Stuff comes in, stuff should come out, right? What should come in is voters go, now by the way, in Franklin County in Massachusetts, 80% of the ballots are hand counted. So when you go into the voting booth, there's two ways. You just fill in your ballot and you put it in a slot. In the electronic voting machines, what happens? That ballot is scanned by the voting system. And guess what's created when it gets scanned? Guess what's generated? Anyone know? What?
A copy.
An image. Like taking a photograph. It's called a ballot image. So when you put your paper in, the paper goes into the bin, an image gets created. Okay? Yes?
I talked to the city clerk in Newton where I live. I worked on the elections. He said that they do not scan them. They do not take the images. They don't set up the machines to do that.
No, he's absolutely lying.
He said they turned it off.
No. We'll talk about what they're actually doing. So, you cannot tabulate a vote unless there's an image. Okay? What they do is they delete the images, which is a violation of federal law 52 U.S.C. 20701. And that Galvin decides to do because when you delete ballot images, you can't show the evidence that the computer algorithm was on. But I'm glad you brought this up, okay? So when the paper goes in, an image is created, and then computer software looks for the ellipse, you know, when you circle in person A, John or Shiva, oh, one vote for John. So you cannot count a vote unless an image is generated, period. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is just very basic. So if anyone tries to BS you, oh, we don't have ballot images like this guy in Newton, he's absolutely lying or he's ignorant, okay? So if P number of voters, let's say everyone here, about 30 people, we go into the voting booth. If 30 of us go into a voting booth, and let's say there's one candidate, right? How many votes should come out?
30.
Okay, so let's all get that clear. 30 of us go in, 30 votes should come out, right? Agreed? Next, John. So, am I okay in the position I'm in?
Yeah, you
Okay, so we call that V, okay? So P number of people go in, voters go in, and V number of votes. Really simple, right? So P equals V. Hey John, can you just stay there? Okay. Maybe I'll just say next. P equals V, okay? That's what you would think, right? Does that make sense? So you should have 10 people go in, you should have 10 votes, right? Next. Well, I'm going to show you now something. So what we did was, on September 1st, you know, I was campaigning all the way. I mean, we probably hit 250 cities with our bus. We went everywhere. We had billboards, lawn signs, radio, everywhere. So on September 1st night, the election results are coming in, and we win in Franklin County by 10 points, which was, remember, 80% hand counted. In every other county, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40. Here's a guy who never campaigned. He wins in all black Brockton. He wins in Hispanic. He wins everywhere. He's like a man for all seasons. Quite amazing. So what I found out was that you could go to a town and you could ask two pieces of documents. One is called a participating voters list. So when you walk in, you know when they check your name off? They put that into a spreadsheet. So it's a list. It's an Excel spreadsheet of everyone who voted, let's say Milford, their name, their party affiliation, right? You don't know how they voted, but their names. So if that spreadsheet has 20 rows, which means 20 people voted, right? So we went and said, wait a minute, something's not adding up. So on my September 1st speech, I didn't concede, still have not conceded. I said, there's no way this guy won. I said, I'm glad we have the Second Amendment. Okay? So we went and did a sampling. We went to different towns, and we wanted to get the participating voters list. Next. So these are the number of participating voters. So for example, Boston, 142,911 people actually came in and voted. Can you see that? In Lawrence, 8,800.
This is a combination of Democrats and Republicans? Or is it
This is anyone who came in and voted. Anyone who voted, exactly. That's P. In New Bedford, 8,914. Newton, you can see 30,284 people. So this is the actual list of people who, they said mail-in ballots, early voting, physical, people came in, etc. Okay? Then we actually looked at the ballots cast. Next. So what do you see here? In Boston, 142,911 people came in, but 147,025 people actually voted. Votes were cast. Next. And what you see is, so in Boston, 4,114 more votes than people who actually voted. Okay? Go look at Newton. 1,780 more votes than people who actually voted. None of the numbers match up. And this is something everyone can do in your town. By law, they have to, I can show you the FOIA, you can issue them, and they have 10 days to give you this data. Very simple exercise, everyone can participate, and this is what we found out. There's more votes cast than voters, than people. This should be perfect. Remember, we pay these guys just to count. We're not asking them to solve the Navier-Stokes equation. We're not asking them to fix plumbing. We're not asking them to do an electrical job. We're not asking them to remodel the kitchen. Just count a bunch of votes. And they can't match these? Yep.
Well, it's interesting because when looking at the voter results, sometimes they say the number of people that put in how many ballots, let's say 575 ballots, but there are only not everybody clicks off City Cream or,
It doesn't matter. This includes all of that.
No, but I'm saying that there are times, you're saying it's the opposite of the reports I'm seeing. The reports I've seen say, 500 voted, but only 500 were there, but there were only 375 votes.
No, but that includes everything. It includes the blank votes, undervotes, overvotes, everything is included.
Right.
It's a total vote. So
Okay,
if you went in and you didn't vote, for either one,
Yeah,
that's still,
yeah.
that's still count, you still get a ballot cast, okay? These are the actual total ballots,
Okay.
okay? These should be perfect. There should, I mean, if you were in accounting and you had $1 off, the IRS comes after you. Just think about it. This is an accounting issue.
So who did you report?
I have 50 years experience in a field called pattern recognition. Can everyone see this? And the reason this is interesting, pattern recognition, what this is about. And my whole life has been spent into that. Bunch of degrees at MIT. You know, I was nominated for the U.S. National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Won every award you could win at MIT, okay? Worked my butt off, not like Elizabeth Warren, okay? Next. So it'll come into, so what you're going to learn today is pattern recognition you're going to learn, and you're going to learn about our electronic voting systems. I had to learn this very quickly. So what you see here is, this is an electronic voting system. Stuff comes in, stuff should come out, right? What should come in is voters go, and now by the way, in Franklin County in Massachusetts, 80% of the ballots are hand counted. So when you go into the voting booth, there's two ways. You just fill in your ballot and you put it in a slot. In the electronic voting machines, what happens? That ballot is scanned by the voting system. And guess what's created when it gets scanned? Guess what's generated? Anyone know? What?
A copy.
An image. Like taking a photograph. It's called a ballot image. So when you put your paper in, the paper goes into the bin, an image gets created. Okay? Yes?
I talked to the city clerk in Newton where I live. I worked on the elections. He said that they do not scan them. They do not take the images. They don't set up the machines to do that.
No, he's absolutely lying.
He said they turned it off.
No. They turn. We'll talk about what they're actually doing. So you cannot tabulate a vote unless there's an image. Okay? What they do is they delete the images, which is a violation of federal law 52 USC 20701. And that Galvin decides to do because when you delete ballot images, you can't show the evidence that the computer algorithm was on. But I'm glad you brought this up, okay? So when the paper goes in, an image is created, and then computer software looks for the ellipse, you know, when you circle in person A, John or Shiva, oh, 1 vote for John. So you cannot count a vote unless an image is generated, period. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is just very basic. So if anyone tries to BS you, oh, we don't have ballot images like this guy in Newton, he's absolutely lying or he's ignorant, okay? So if P number of voters, let's say everyone here, about 30 people, we go into the voting booth in Milford, weighted race feature, what is that? Well, when P goes in, V should come out. Next, guess what they have? You think V should equal P, right? But guess what actually goes on next? V is actually P, the number of people who come in, times a weight.
Right.
So if 100 people came in, they could multiply that by 1.2. So you get 120 votes. Or you could multiply it by 0.666. Okay, so you get 66 votes. You follow what I'm saying? And why am I saying that? So there's a feature in the software that tabulates the votes. So when the ballot goes in, it's scanned into a ballot image. Remember that ballot image? When it counts it, that's the count, and then they're tabulated. Tabulation takes place centrally. And there's a move to centralize voting completely at the state level or at the county level. Because when you centralize, you can throw on the weighted race feature. And if you don't believe this exists, I'll show it to you. Next. Next. This is the Diebold 2002 manual. Diebold, started by ES&S, which used to be based out of Andover, Massachusetts. Diebold is the GEM system. You know, they make all the ATMs. They used to be in the voting system. They are the grandfather of all voting systems. The Dominion systems, the Smartmatic system, they all have a lineage to these systems, okay? So I'm going to show you, this is a user's manual of 2002, and we're going to go to page 2-126. Next. And it's page 2-126, and there's a page here. Scroll in, John, zoom in. It's called the weighted race feature. Next. It said weighted races. It's a feature you can turn on. Weighted races are tallied by weights. assigned from the voter registration may be counted in central count vote centers only. So if I get 1,000 votes, John gets 1,000 votes, they get set on weights. For every vote John gets, it could be multiplied by 2. He gets 2,000 votes, and every vote Shiva gets multiplied by 0.5. This is a feature. And if I showed you the manual, which it's in our lawsuit, for the Dominion systems, the feature's there in 2018,
How
2019.
did you get a straight judge?
So, what's that?
How did you get a legit judge?
Luck. If you believe there's a God, or pure luck. Okay? The judge we have is a guy called Mark Wolf, appointed by Reagan, and he's a constitutionalist, and I'll get to that. Okay? So, we found this out. Weighted race feature. Everyone see this?
Yeah.
How many people knew this existed?
How many people what?
And where'd you learn about that?
From you.
No, on TV I saw him do.
We're the ones who brought it out, okay?
Your presentation of you, like a month ago.
Right. This has existed for 20 years. Both parties have been using this feature. Why was this feature put in? This feature was originally developed for voting and housing associations. Let's say we all lived in the condo unit. Let's say Dick owned 2,000 square feet of condo, John owned 1,000, everyone else owned 1,000. When he got to vote for some maintenance, right? Because his condo fees may be a little bit higher, he got 2 votes to our 1 vote. That made sense. But that was left in for federal elections. Okay? Does this make sense? Both parties know about this. It's been in there. Why do I say that? Every voting system is certified by the Secretary of State. It's blessed by them. All secretaries of state belong to an association called the National Association of State Election Directors, and also the National Association of Secretaries of State, NASS and NASED. Again, I found out all this in September.
Wow.
Okay? That association is a non-profit, NASED. It's funded, and you can look at it. It's not conspiracy, funded by the Rockefeller brothers and the Murdoch family. Quadrivium, okay? NASED wants to centralize vote tabulation. Their executive director, a woman called Amy Cohen, is the one in another organization that she started. That organization got $50 million in September 2020 by Zuckerberg to centralize voting. They want to centralize vote tabulation because then you can flip it even faster. You see, if every precinct is doing like in the old days, where we have hand-counted ballots, where we tabulate them and we report them on the day, you can't, when it's decentralized, you can't pull this stuff. But when it's centralized on digital medium, you can flip votes all day long.
Yeah.
I'm a technologist, I'm telling you, as someone who's created email, creates technology, started 7 companies, voting should go back to paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got to go and counted. And elections should be bigger than Christmas.
Right.
We should call election day off.
Yes.
Okay? And kids should be involved in counting. That's what election day should become. And so, can we detect when the weighted race feature is enabled? So we went to Galvin and said, give me the ballot images. He doesn't have them. If we had the ballot images, we could have figured out the weighted race feature, because if you look at the total number of ballot images, right, they should match the total number of votes. Everyone getting it? So they delete the ballot images very conveniently because it is the evidence that can show when the weighted race feature is on. You see, it's a criminal deleting the evidence to the crime, right?
Violating the Mass General
No
law.
question, let the guy.
They're
do his
getting away with it
presentation.
because we live in a third world freaking state.
You're right.
We live among criminals. This is what everyone's got to get clear. This is no different than living in a dictatorship. Because this stuff is going on. Why is a weighted race feature even in here? Why is Secretaries of State even allowing this? Next. So, if we can't get the ballot images, how do we find out what the weights were? So I had to start using mathematics. So yes, we could see it if the Secretary gave us the ballot images, the cast vote records, and the list vote records, and the log files. These are all due to us by FOIA. What are all these things? Well, every time a ballot image is scanned in, it creates a cast vote record. The list vote records are all the adding up of all the cast vote records. And the log files are everything that took place on that machine. So I asked for those 4 things. We still haven't gotten them. What they said was they're deleted. So starting September 9th on Twitter, I started tweeting out. And I have a pretty big following. I started saying election fraud took place in third world Massachusetts. Galvin destroyed ballots, -ballot images. That's what he destroyed. Those tweets started going viral. Twitter never took me off, by the way. And I kept putting this out there. On September 25th, I get an email from the Secretary of State's legal counsel, Michelle Tassinari. You may want to write her name down. She is also the president now of the National Association of State Election Directors. Okay? She was a president-elect. She's Massachusetts State Election Director. She sends me an email saying, we don't have the ballot images. We're not required to store them by Massachusetts law. Email 1. I write back and I say, Michelle, can you please tell me what Massachusetts law allows you to delete the ballot images? Next email from her says, we save the paper ballots, but we don't store the ballot images. I write back, I said, you violated federal law. This election is null and void. Those 4 emails, 2 of mine and 2 of hers, I put up on Twitter. She's a public official. Those start going viral. And within literally 5 hours, I am banned on Twitter for 21 days. I've never been banned on Twitter since 2011. Okay? Meanwhile, one of these fact-checking organizations writes a hit job on me. Oh, Shiva's lying. You know, no ballots were deleted. No, I said ballot images. And then they say, we contacted the Secretary of State's office. They told us they contacted Twitter to say that Dr. Shiva was spreading election misinformation. So just, now think about what I'm talking about here. We had moved our campaign to a write-in campaign. You have the Secretary of State contacting Twitter to shut down a federal candidate. The First Amendment was created for political speech, number 1 reason. The state could, the king could shut you down. The reason the founders created the First Amendment was you could say anything against public officials. So here, the Secretary of State contacted Twitter to shut me down. So I tried to find a lawyer. No lawyer wanted to take us on. I had to file the lawsuits in federal court by myself. So we filed our first lawsuit saying violation of the First Amendment. Going after Twitter is going to be forever, Section 230. Election integrity is going to be forever. So we filed a lawsuit saying that the Secretary of State violated my First Amendment by contacting Twitter. And we have the idiots in the newspaper put it out there. So it was supposed to be a 1-hour hearing. So I wrote the petition, and the guy, first victory is the guy gave us a hearing. Normally he could have thrown it out. The judge wanted to hear the case. The judge, Mark Wolf, so it's me against 3 lawyers, Harvard-trained lawyers. 4-hour hearing. And we filed 2 parts of that lawsuit. One was a petition. One was what's called a restraining order. Remember, I'm in the middle of a federal election campaign. I wanted the judge to restrain Galvin from ever contacting Twitter and shutting me down. Okay? And the second part of the lawsuit is for about $1.2 billion, the actual lawsuit. Judges do not like to give restraining orders. You know why? Because when they give you the restraining order, it's a signal you're going to win the whole case. And you need, in order to get a restraining order, you need to prove that you will suffer irreparable harm if they don't do something right away. The defendant is not going to suffer irreparable harm. And that you're likely to win the whole case. The judge gave it to us. No one reported on this.
Wow.
I am freaking shocked.
Yeah, because we argued it. I had to study law, guys. I proved what's called cat's paw liability. It's a very famous precedent case, and the Blum test. And the judge was quite impressed. He ripped the other lawyer, Adam Hornstein, who's the assistant AG. He goes, I gave Dr. Shiva this lawsuit. He goes, you had 10 days. And he goes, he did a much better job than you. Okay? So we showed that the cat's paw liability comes from the famous Aesop's fable story where there's a cat and a monkey. There's a chestnut on a barbecue, and the monkey doesn't want to get the chestnut. So he induces the stupid cat to take the chestnut, okay? And the cat gets his hand burned. It's called cat's paw liability, which means a monkey induced the cat to do it. The monkey here was the Secretary of State, which induced the cat, Twitter, to do that action. So we showed that. It's a very famous precedent-setting case. So we got that. We got our restraining order. You can read it. Okay? Got two victories there. First, they heard us, and second, they gave us a restraining order. And that lawsuit is there. But in that lawsuit, in that 4-hour hearing, a young, I think she must have been in her 20s or 30s, the judge says, so how did you decide to take Dr. Shiva down? She goes, oh, my boss told me, Michelle Tasnari, to call Twitter. She goes, and what did you do? She goes, oh, I went to Twitter and complained Dr. Shiva's spreading election misinformation, meaning ballot images were destroyed. And then he said, well, did you think they would do something? He goes, yeah. She said, yeah. And he goes, why? He goes, oh, we have a Twitter partnership. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, we have like a hotline to Twitter. When we call them, so the opposing counsel was arguing, oh, this is just anyone could have complained to Twitter. We're not all equal. It turned out that they also called the National Association of State Election Directors, Amy Cohen, who's the executive director. She even has a hotter line to Twitter. My expose that ballot images were deleted goes at the heart of the entire way that American elections are run. That's why they took me down for 21 days. So we have that lawsuit, has not been dismissed, it's there. We filed all of our oppositions, and we'll see what the judge does. Okay? We have a process where you're looking for a feature, okay? Then you do some math to cluster it, and then you figure out, is it normal or abnormal? Next. So I'll give you an example. So the question in election is, what's the normal pattern, and what's the abnormal pattern? Okay? Next. Next. So our objective was to determine the future of a signal. Next. What is the normal state and the abnormal state? Next. And to develop models to explain it. Next. And I presented this at the Oversight Committee. So there's two types of voting, and Michigan has a very interesting voting pattern. You can go vote. You know how we vote here? You vote for a candidate. But in Michigan, you can do straight party voting. It's one of the 7 states. You know what that is? You just go in and you just say, I'm a Republican. And it just vote, and you don't have to do anything else. All the Republicans, it's in one fell swoop. You vote for all Republicans or you vote for all Democrats. Yeah, it's called straight party voting.
New York, you can do elections.
Yeah. So, next, so we were able to, so what we did was, so some people can vote individually by candidates. You know, they can choose Trump or Biden, or they can choose a candidate, A or B, next. Or they can vote by party, all Republican or all Democrat. Next. And each precinct tracks is a voter either casting straight party or individual. So we had, so what we're looking at is the feature is, on the x-axis, we're going to look at the individual percent of individual candidate votes minus the straight party votes. It's a difference, okay? And on the y-axis, we're going to look at the straight party votes. Next. So next. Keep going. So for example, let's say 200 total voters go to a precinct in Michigan. 100 voters vote straight party. Okay? The other 100 vote by individual. So let's say 60 votes go to Republican. That means Trump got 60% of those straight party votes, right? Let's say 40 votes went to Democrats, 40% went to Biden. Does that make sense? Everyone tracking?
Yeah.
Next. The other 100 voters were individual candidates. And let's say 65 people voted for Trump. Individually, that's 65%. And 35 people voted for Biden, that'd be 35%. So 200 went into voting booth, 100 people voted straight party, the other people voted individually, okay? So what we were seeing next was we were measuring the difference between the individual candidate vote, which would be, in that case, Trump 65%, minus a Republican, which would be 60, so you get 5%, okay? It's a feature. Next, and we plotted them. Next. So in that case, the x-axis is a Republican straight party vote, and the y-axis is the individual, okay? Next. And you could plot these graphs. Next. And so, obviously, if we're going 0% means no Republicans, and as you move over to the right, you get precincts with high Republican percentages. Got it? Because we're plotting, So, next, Sean. And so those would be high Republican percentages. Next. And so, for example, here's the straight line means, this red line means you're on track to how the straight, so typically, if it's a high Republican precinct, Trump should be winning in those, right? Or you should have the individual and the straight party voting matching. That's what the 0% means. Next. So, let's look at the normal and abnormal states, okay? Next. Next. So, by the way, we're looking at Jefferson County in the Jeff Sessions election in Alabama. What do you see here? We're plotting this, so you go from 0 precincts Republican all the way to heavy Republican precincts, okay? And what you get here is this curve. Next, John. You should get this hyperbolic curve. This is what's called the normal state, which means as you move left to right, he's not going to get that many votes here, right? Because these are highly Democrat. This is going to be independents. And then as you go here, it's going to go below because you get more and more Republicans here, okay? This is a feature you should always see. It's like the QRST complex. This is what's called the normal pattern. In the interest of time, just trust me, this is a normal pattern. Next, I'll give you another example. This is John McCain. Next, in Arizona, same pattern, okay? Next, this is in Saginaw County, where they didn't cheat in Michigan. Next, same pattern. You see, you get that beautiful parabolic curve. This is what you should normally see when you do this kind of plotting. Everyone tracking?
Yeah.
All right, this is like a normal heartbeat. Next. So if you look at it, this curve is composed of like 3 different pieces. This straight part, a little flat part, and this, okay? It's at least a curve that has 3 components. Next. So I call this a function here, f of x, g of x, and h of x. I don't want to overwhelm you, but simply put, it should be made up of 3 pieces, okay, if it's a normal curve. Next. Next. So that's a normal state, this nice little curve, umbrella. Next. What you find when we started plotting this for Oakland County, what do you find? You find a straight line. This is in Oakland County, Michigan. Next over here, same thing, a straight line. It's not supposed to be a straight line. It should be a curve. And what you see is, as Trump gets more and more Republican, he gets less and less votes. Okay, next. In fact, it occurs too fast. Next. So, it's not a parabolic arc. It's a single function. It's just a line. It shouldn't be just a line. Next. Missing features. Next. It's unnatural. Next. Completely linear. Next. So, this is again in Macomb County. Same thing. Next. And we did both early voting and on election day, right? So this is mail-in, early voting, election day. Next. And same thing here. This was quite profound. Next. You'll see it's almost an amazing box. It's programmed. Okay? It's like as you go this way, you can I can calculate that for you. Okay? Everyone following? It's not supposed to look like this, ever. Next. So, this is how it should look. Next. Instead, next, it's a line. Okay? So, normal state, abnormal state. Get it? Pattern recognition. Next. So, no different than the cardiology graph. Okay? Make sense? Next. Next. Kent County. Quite amazing. Okay? Next. So next. So across these 3 major counties, President Trump loses votes in direct proportion to percent Republicans in a precinct. More Republicans, more votes he loses. Next. Too linear. It's machine-like. Next. It's a line, a constant slope, not a parabola with varying slopes. Next. A weighted function imposed on reality. Now I'm going to show what happened in Massachusetts. We did this before this. So we have 2 cases in federal court right now. 1189, which is the one we got that first victory, and then I filed on October 30th, in early November, another case to decertify the entire election. I'm asking for decertification of the entire U.S. Senate election.
Absolutely.
Total decertification. And that's 12080. When we filed that, Galvin and all of his same attorneys, Maura Healey, filed a 120-page brief to dismiss our case. Now remember, all of the cases that Trump filed, you know all of them were dismissed, right?
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
70-something.
Yeah. The judge denies their dismissal. Okay? He basically he says there's merit. In fact,
Was he
gave.
the same judge for the Whitey Bulger Mafia?
Yeah. Mark Wolf went after Whitey Bulger. Okay? So we'll see what he does, but so far, whatever happens, we've gotten 2 victories because but when people dismiss a case, that means they don't see any merit in it. And our case is based on this singular principle. It's not about Stop the Steal, which was run by a complete scumbag called Ali Alexander. Okay? And you should go read about him. The real principle here is one person, one vote. In 1787, slaves were deemed 3/5 by the North, by the way. And then Dred Scott tried to get his freedom, and they said, no, you're 3/5 of a citizen. It was not until 1964 that Judge Earl Warren clarified the 14th Amendment and the 5th Amendment. He said the 5th Amendment applies to the 14th Amendment to states, saying one person, one vote. You can't be having some counties where you had only 200 people, they get a senator. Another county has 10,000 people, they get a senator. One person, one vote was what this country was founded on. Next, so what do we do here? So what happened? So remember I told you in Franklin County, hand counted, I win by 10 points. In every other county, 60-40, 60-40. It was always like a machine. But one of my friends who's been doing election math for probably 20 years, Phil Evans. Phil Evans and I got very lucky. He goes, oh my God, Shiva, I haven't seen this. He goes, you got lucky. You got a unicorn, which means mathematical unicorn. What you're seeing here is the election voting pattern in one of the counties called Suffolk County. Suffolk County is primarily Democrat. In Boston, which is highly Democrat. And very low number of people vote Republican there. It's like 80, 90% Democrat. Only about 2,000 or 3,000 votes were cast there. But what we see is something very fascinating in this graph. And this is where we were able to figure out what weights were used against me and what weights were given to this guy. What you see here is the x-axis are precinct numbers, and the y-axis, and I'll explain this, are the number of precincts with that number of votes. So let me explain. So this is 1, which means precincts that only had 1 vote for me. Only 1 vote. There were precincts which... So what do you see? There were nearly 20 precincts, or 25 precincts, where I only got 1 vote. Okay? Does that make sense? But just the pattern is, remember, I'm teaching you pattern analysis, okay? Then there were about 10 precincts where I only got 2 votes. Okay, so 25 precincts where I got 1 vote. 1 is what? An odd number. Are we remembering that?
Yeah.
And then I get 10 precincts where I get 2 votes. What is 2? Even number. So the number of odds to even is what? 2 to 1. Okay? Then I get 3 precincts, another odd number, where I get almost 26 votes. 26 precincts where I get 3 votes. And then I get another 10 precincts where I get 10 votes. You see the pattern? 4 votes. 10 precincts where I got 4 votes. Okay? And then you get another about 20 precincts where I get 5 votes. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. That means double the number of odds, then double the number of evens. And it's high-low patterns that goes on for 9 times. This is like you going to a roulette table and getting double the number of evens and odds. It doesn't occur mathematically. Okay? So what we did was we took this pattern, and by the way, go to Cox. Say Cox isn't like this. Next. I'm sorry. So what you see here is, you see it's high-low, 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 high-low. It's 9 series of high-low patterns with 2 to 1 ratio. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
Odd to even. Everyone go to casinos, you know what I'm talking about, okay? It's like having, you're going to win, you're going to beat the house all the time. Next. So what we did was I ran with the computers, this is what I do for a living, I simulated the whole election, and I ran 100,000 iterations of this thing, and we found out that could only occur, you can't read it, 1 out of 161 elections, okay? Which may seem okay, that's just high lows. Next, then I said, what about if it was high lows but 2 to 1, right? Number of odds even. Well, that would only occur 1 out of 100,000 elections. I don't even think we've had that many elections in 250 years. Impossible. Next, we calculated how this could occur. Next. And it turns out the way this could occur is if my votes were multiplied, is fascinating, by 0.666. Okay? What's that? And his votes were multiplied by 1.2. We had to back calculate it. Next. And what we did was we redid Suffolk County. So the red is what I ended up in Suffolk, which was 38%, and he had 57. When you de-weight the elections, I get 57%, he gets 47%. Okay?
You beat 'em.
I would have beat him. I know I won this election. Everyone was saying, Shiva, you won. It's like we were everywhere. So we did this for, and this is, by the way, in the lawsuit. Next. Norfolk, same thing. You see, here I lose 34 to 60. Okay, 30. And here, I would have won by a small margin. Next. Here, same thing. Every county, I win. Next. Next. And you can keep going. Next. Worcester, it keeps going. So this was the weighted race where he wins. Okay? Next. And in the unweighted race, I win. Okay? So we back calculate. This is in the lawsuit, and they have not rebutted it. Their opposition doesn't even talk about this. They haven't brought in an expert. They can't rebut this. So this is in Massachusetts. We've shown that our weights were multiplied by a vote. Basically, all my voters were 2/3 of a person. Okay? Anyone who voted for Dr. Shiva Vers3 was counted as 2/3.
And everybody.
And anyone who voted for him-
Against you
What?
was 1.25%.
1.2. Okay? It's not one person, one vote. Next. So that was Massachusetts. And I'll finish up with this. This is what I did at the Arizona hearing, which also went viral, where Rudy Giuliani cross-examined me. Next. So we found out, next. So I'll just give you, so what, next. So let's just, so what we did here next, in the interest of time, so we have questions. What we did was we recreated the entire Arizona Maricopa County. Maricopa County is like huge, okay? So what we did was, what we're plotting is, on the x-axis, we're looking at the total. So basically you organize all the precincts by low number of votes to high number of votes. And you look at the total number of votes here. So we're literally recreating the election. So the blue is Biden as, quote unquote, time goes on, okay? And what you see is Biden's here and Trump is over here. Next. So Biden got 49%. This was what was actually reported in Maricopa County. Next. And Trump got 47.6. Very close election, okay? But you notice a pattern of this curve. It goes up and it has a slope. So what we can do with the computer is we were trying to figure out, I can re-simulate this election by saying, okay, how many Democrats, how many Republicans, how many Libertarians, etc. Next. So we ran simulations. Next. So here's one simulation. So the green is Biden and the Trump is our simulated. This is the actual, we're simulating it. So in this case, we're looking at Biden, Democrats, 20% of Democrats went to Biden, 80% went to Trump, right? Republicans, 80% went to Biden, and 20% went to Trump. You see, we can simulate, we can put different mixtures, combinations. Everyone follow me? Demographics, next. So here's another one. We said, okay, imagine Biden got 80% Democrats and Trump got 20, still not matching. You see?
Right.
Next. Okay, we said, okay, imagine Biden got 100% Democrats and Trump didn't get any. And Trump got 80% Republicans, and you also have Libertarians, etc. Next. And we did 100,000 of these simulations. John, go back a little bit. Go back. Just do it, one, boom, 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 right? So you'll see it's a simulation. Hit one, John. You see how we're simulating? Boom. And then we found out this one was the only one that matched. And what do you find out? You find out in order for this election to have been real, Biden would have had to get 130% Democrats, and Trump would have had to get minus 30%. That means for every one vote Trump got, 7/10 of it were taken away. And so I presented this. People, you know, this is the only way. And the curve fits beautifully. It's like right on top of it. Okay, next. So what we showed was, so that's what you would have had to do. Next. So one possibility is there's a demographic within the independent voters, which we missed, right? The other is that Biden's actual voters were multiplied by 1.3, meaning each single vote Biden actually received became 1.3 reported votes, and President Trump's votes are reduced by 0.3, or a 30% gain. Simply put, vote swapping. Next. So, in closing, this is the essence, the real crime scene is one person, one vote. It's not mail-in ballots. That's like the receipts. You know, the sales guy makes up receipts. It's in the accounting system itself. The mail-in ballots, whether you do them right or wrong, you can still flip the votes. Does everyone get this? You can do mail-in ballots perfectly. You can do mail-in ballots horribly. It doesn't matter. It's the flipping of the votes. Next. So the legislators, this is what we need to do. We need to ban electronic voting systems.
Amen.
They need to just all go away. And given we know how to write these lawsuits, as Ann said, I'm already working on the bill. Okay, we have people working on it. We need to go to hand-counted paper ballots. So in our lawsuit, we've asked for two things. One, to decertify the marquee election. We've also asked to hand count the entire Republican primary.
Amen.
And there is precedence for this. In Wyman versus Durkin in New Hampshire, the guy actually went to the Senate, and then the Senate had to redo the election 8 months after he was in. So this doesn't mean you cannot do this. There's precedence. And the committee must request of each Board of Election Commissioners to submit to them the ballot images. That's what we need to do. All the committee members on the election boards here must ask for the ballot images. Next. People, we need to issue a public records request. And I've put a video out there. We teaches you how to do it. Anyone can do it in their local, and this is where we can have some control at the local level. And everyone should go see, does P equal V in your town? Okay? Next. And here's the conclusion. Next. The inputs and the outputs of our voting systems are unverifiable. We don't have, if they're not verifiable, it's garbage in, garbage out. Does that make sense? You can't verify because they delete the ballot images. Next. So what we need is we need verifiable inputs. So we got to have permanent voter registration cards. Okay?
Yes.
Number two, we have to have open source software. If we're going to do this,
Democrats will never agree to any of that.
well, this is why it has to be local. Hand-counted paper ballots. That's why I think if we go to one person, one vote, that's the call that I'm issuing. Because this is beyond Democrats used to, are we all slaves then? Okay?
They don't care.
Right. We need to save ballot images for federal law. We need to publish ballot images in the cloud. If we're going to do ballot images, look, just publish them in the cloud. We'll all count them. Because we could all count them. Kids could count them. We could all be counting ballot images in any town, right? There's no automatic audits. Audit every election and publish the precinct level poll tapes. What do I mean by that? You know, we used to have the old town crier, right? They used to count. They used to publish and they used to say, John won, right? Ann won. It was done on that night at the local precinct level. The fact that we centralize it, we transport it, that's where all the monkey business takes place. So in closing, it's really about one person, one vote. I've given you 3 examples. Sidney Powell, you know, look, I went to the meeting on January 4th where Mike Lindell and Sidney Powell and Flynn had me come in to educate all the senators. And what I came out is the senators don't want to do anything, guys.
No.
These people are all, they know this is going on.
They benefit from getting reelected every year.
They get reelected every year. So no one's going to do it. There's no messiah out there that's going to do it. It's us. And we have to do it locally at every precinct level. So your action is, I can show you guys how to go get this data. You can still do it now. The P and the V, we need to move to a hand-counted ballot model, period. You cannot trust any of this. You cannot trust it. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It's about raising awareness and building a movement bottoms up.
Right.
Look, we are all slaves right now. Let's get this clear. Forget about waiting for Q for 4 years. Oh, Trump plays 9th dimensional chess. Okay? Hillary, something's going to happen to Hillary. Nothing happened. This is the old model. Wait until the Messiah comes. It never happened.
Right.
What we have to do is we have to recognize the most important thing is to build a bottoms-up movement. We have to every Monday night, I'm teaching people political theory again. There's fundamental political theory we need to learn. That you need to build this on truth, freedom, and health. Without freedom, we can never pursue science and get truth. And without truth, we're never going to have health. And without healthy people, you're never going to fight for freedom. That's number 1. We have to build a bottoms-up movement. And 3, we have to be able to call out not the establishment, but the not so obvious establishment.